Hi, I'm Paul Ostermanier, and this is Roast the Post, the story behind the bullet points. Hey, everybody. Jen and I are circling back, like we said we would, from our experiment where we took your questions in an AMA format from the pub in Toronto when Jen was in town. There were tons that we didn't get to because we had such a great experience talking with everybody who attended. Thank you again for joining us on our very first Substack Live. We had a bunch of questions we didn't get to, and we were like, these are so cool. These are great questions. Let's come back to them. So here we are. We are coming back to them. This is the follow-up from the Happy Hour Substack Live in the pub. You ready, Jen?
I'm ready. Instead of a glass of white wine, I've got some cold coffee and a half-drinking protein shake. So a little bit of a different vibe, but we're here. We're here for it all.
Cold coffee is definitely the Thursday 1:30 p.m. drink of choice on the West Coast, I hear.
Absolutely.
So first question that we did not get to that I wanted to come back to. This is a great question. It's from Emma, and she wrote in ahead of time and said, how can I ensure I'm not just hiring for skills and experience, but also for cultural fit and long-term alignment with our company, which is really mission driven? I want people who can execute, but also who believe in what we're building. How do I balance these priorities during the interview process? And Emma also said in her submission that she was a founder. She started a small direct-to-consumer kind of subscription e-commerce company. So that's like the background context for what she asked. And it's a great topic to dig into. Like, how do you balance cultural fit with the ability to get stuff done? What do you think?
Yeah, this is a really great question, and it's such a challenge, especially like when you were the founder and this is your baby and you care so much about it. And all of those things are so important. I think that it is really you say you're mission driven, like what are your values and how do those play into your hiring process? What do you value more? Because you're going to have to make trade-offs. Every once in a while, there's that perfect person who can do the job and they are a good fit for your organization. But that doesn't happen very often. So would you rather have someone who is culturally aligned and maybe needs a bit more time to get up to speed? Or do you want someone who can hit the ground running and maybe they're not quite culturally aligned? I could tell you what I would prefer, which would be somebody who is more values and mission aligned and might take a little bit longer to learn what they need to do the job. And the reason for that is if you get someone in the organization who is like a cultural atomic bomb, you're screwed. And that spreads. It spreads so much. Just like somebody who is like really values aligned and just like a great cultural addition to your organization, just like how that will spread, so will the opposite. And it can be detrimental to the organization. So I think it depends on your team size and your bandwidth and how much you have to give to this person to train them to where they need to be. In terms of how you can kind of assess for that, that's a tough one. I was recently told about, and I can't remember, Paul, if we discussed this or not, but told about a company that does not list their values anywhere on their website or in their job postings because they try to tease that out of the person through the interview process. And that way they know that it's like an authentic values aligned hire because it's just going to surface through their process instead of someone saying, I align with these values X, Y, and Z because they read it on your socials or on the job posting, and they can kind of like engineer their interview to tell you all the things that they think you want to hear. This is a way of surfing it organically or surfacing it organically, pardon me.
Wow.
So that's something to play around with as well. We could go into the mechanics of what that could look like, but I want to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts on Emma's really great questions.
That's so fascinating. Like a company that deliberately obfuscates their mission, vision, values, so that they can have kind of honest, organic conversations and recruiting, that's a huge sacrifice, because that means that you're not using your MVV to build brand value and for purpose aligned marketing. That's a big sacrifice that they've purposefully made to be able to do that. But I kind of get it. Like I kind of dig it. I would I would wonder if the trade off is worth it in the long run. But if it's a very people oriented company, and the success of the organization really rests on having those purpose driven kind of like people on the bandwagon, maybe it's worth it. I
But you
get
would
it.
get the gist of it anyway by knowing what the company does, right? Like you
Mm,
would get the gist of what their values just might be based on
mm,
the organization itself. And maybe it's not the mission. It's just like for this instance, it was the values, the
mm,
core values that were not shared ahead of time. It's like a secret club, right?
mm.
Like it's very interesting in that way. Again, we could do a whole episode on that, and maybe we should, as just kind
Probably
of
should.
an exploration. But yeah, what about your thoughts on how you kind of gauge for that, or how
Yeah.
you make that trade-off or decide what's most important to you?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same camp as you. Like the potential cost of having a hire who is who's toxic, really.
Yeah.
The cost of that coming into your organization is huge. Like one person who's toxic can derail and kind of pollute the outlook and kind of the other people in the organization, and cause them to kind of get off track too. So I would also lean a lot more towards the making sure that the people dynamics side of it, like the culture and the fit and everything, is more in place than it is like the get done part of it. Like small company, yeah, you want people who can get done, absolutely. But a toxic GSDer is not going to work out so well for you in the long run. Where someone who maybe isn't driven but is a spectacular fit and can support other people and can create network effects and productivity, um, that's a pretty good investment to make, even if at the start you're not getting as much from them on the productivity side as you might like. How do you determine that? That's the age old question. We've talked about this a lot, like the mechanisms that you can put in place to determine fit. You can't do it on paper. Absolutely, you can't. And you can't do it through, you can't do it really well through interviews, even though, our system kind of rests on doing interviews to figure that sort of stuff out. Like I really feel more and more over time goes on that you can really only suss out strong cultural fit and strong alignment across a team by having candidates with the team to do certain things. And again, like we've talked about this a lot before, like don't be exploitive about it. Don't expect people to come in and work with your team for a day for free. Like that's just icky. But figure out some sort of structure or system where you can give people a trial that's paid fairly and run them through a process where everybody that they're going to be working with really gets a sense of how they work and how the fit and how the vibes are. Then talk to all your people, and make sure that that's the case. And for a small organization, it can kind of be easier to do this when you're in a small organization, when you're in a large organization. So like, don't be scared off by the fact that you're a smaller organization and you're founder led. I think that's actually a strength for doing like in-person trial days or something like that.
And I want to speak to a couple of things here. One is that I have very strong feelings about cultural fit as a concept, to begin with. So when I say hiring someone for like fit, I'm not saying like if you're a company where everyone goes for a beer together on Friday, that's cultural fit. It's not
Mm,
that. You can have very different ways of being and still fit into an organization very well. That's a question of whether the organization kind of adapts for different personalities and is okay with that. So I just wanted to talk about that for a second. And then the other thing you mentioned too, I like that. I think that's a really good indication of understanding how someone will collaborate. What is their collaborative range and how does that work within your organization? You do that by seeing how people work together. Now, it can be asynchronously. I think that the key here is to make sure that you're doing an example, like a case study that's true to how you work. If you work remotely and asynchronously, then that's how it should be. But it should include other members of the team. It doesn't have to be like we're going to meet up together in person or on a Zoom and we're going to work through this problem together. If that's how you work, sure. But if it's not, then just replicate it to be true to your organization. I think that's really important as well. And I think asking true situational questions, so questions that are true to your organization, instead of just making up, like, tell me a time that you dealt with a difficult, like a conflict at work. Talk about the conflicts at work that come up for your organization, and then get them to walk through that scenario and what they would do in that moment. I think that's going to be a better indicator of how they will like fit into things, and how they will navigate within your environment way better than just some generic, bland question. Generic interview questions get generic responses, and you don't want that. This is important. You have to be really intentional about how you design those questions.
Yeah, I've always felt I had my share of interview questions that were, you know, canned and formulaic and from the best practices textbook that was written 30 years ago, and they drive me bananas. And you touched on a good one there. Like, how do you deal with conflict in the workplace? A lot of the time that question is phrased almost like that. You know, tell me about a time that you had to navigate conflict and how you went about it. That drives me nuts, because then it's like I have to sit there and my brain, the cognitive like processes of my brain have to switch to recall. So automatically I'm thinking back through like, oh, when did I have a big problem with some person and what did I do about it? That's not very cognitively efficient because it relies on memory. And a lot of people who are like me and have really bad memories, it's a tough question. But if you had said the question like, okay, imagine a scenario where person A and person B are working on this. These are the organizational dynamics. One person is the boss. The other person is, you know, not directly reporting to them. They conflict over a billing practice or something like that. You're the group, the business unit manager. How would you resolve that? That question, it gets me cognitively engaged in critical thinking and in like situational awareness and all those things. Like, oh, okay, I can picture what this is about, this conflict. Let me think through the steps out loud while we discuss it. That's a heck of a lot more of a productive question in an interview.
You are seeing the work behind the work. You're seeing the process that they take, all the little like hoops and stuff that they're doing to get to the outcome, versus them. Let's be honest, it's one thing to recall an old memory of a conflict you had, but a lot of people just make that up, because how do you know the difference? How would you know otherwise, right? And you're the hero in this situation. You're always going to be the hero in the situation. And is that even a question that applies to the work that they're going to be doing? Like, ugh. So yeah.
And I will admit that when I've been asked that question in the past and I couldn't come up with an answer because I couldn't remember quickly enough, I made it up. I mean, it's absolutely how I would handle it, but I made it up.
Of course. And it's so like how I handled that situation was relevant to that organization and those dynamics and that culture. It doesn't mean that that's how I would approach the conflict at this organization. I don't have enough information to be able to tell you how, like, and you know full well that that's going to be the question that they ask you. So you can prepare ahead of time if you're a prepper. And just have some canned response ready to go that doesn't even apply to the organization that you're stepping into. It's frustrating. I find that like my blood pressure gets going when we talk about this, because I think that we're just interviewing people in such an archaic, antiquated way that just needs to change and hasn't and won't. I don't know unless we do something about it. So yeah,
well, that's why we have the show.
And also like, Emma, you are it. Like, you have the ability to interview in any way that you want to. You can redesign, and maybe with your team, co-create, co-design a process that works for you. You don't have to do all of the steps that we are all so used to doing. You could like reimagine what it is and what makes sense for your organization, and then just do it that way. Like, that's so exciting to me. I'm excited for you that you get to completely redesign it. And maybe it's not you, maybe it's someone on your team who has a like really good critical thinking, emotional intelligence, is someone who's really innovative. Maybe give them that opportunity to be like, if If you could redesign this process and forget everything we know about hiring, what would it look like?
Yeah,
And
that'd be a great learning and development opportunity for somebody too, right? Like to give someone a project like that and say, hey, reimagine the hiring process. That'd
yeah,
be awesome. That'd be so awesome for somebody in the organization. And I think, like to your point, I think that more and more companies are going to have to start reimagining their hiring process, like in the backdrop of we've got this AI arms race going on,
yeah,
right? Where increasingly ATS systems and candidate pipelines are run by AI, which will kind of converge on a single way of doing things for every company, regardless of whether or not it's the right way of doing things. Then on the other side, you've got the candidates who are using AI to write their resumes. And their resumes and all of their supporting materials and stuff are being based on the job description, which is also written by AI. So you've got AI talking to AI and kind of putting people in the middle as like this weird intermediator between two systems that are supposed to have been, trained to reflect how people think and act. And like it's all going to break down. I think we're seeing some signs of that already. So companies are going to have to reimagine how to do this, and they're going to have to be creative and what works, excuse me, about what works for them.
yes. One thing I'd like to add, I know we're taking so much time answering this question, but it is such a good question, and
Awesome question.
we we both have so much to say about it. I worked at a big national corporation years and years ago. And one of the things, like there was a lot that I didn't like about working in corporate, but I also had some really great learnings. And one of the things they talked about was the concept that we are all recruiters, all of
Mm,
us at every level of the organization. So, for example, if you go to Starbucks every day and get your drink, and there's a barista serving you who just remembers everyone's names or just connects with people or just has a certain kind of like vibe to them, or it's your bank teller or wherever it is, that is your pipeline. If you're like
mhm,
seeing that person is they've got something there, why not recruit that person? Why
mhm,
if it's culture that you're looking for that is the most important, skills, all sorts of skills and everything, like those, depending on the role, they can learn them. And the right type of person can learn them very quickly. And the right type of environment creates an amazing opportunity for that. But we are all recruiters. I was doing some like gun thing there. We are all recruiters. I'm getting annoyed with myself because I'm talking too much. Identify those people. They're out there in your community and in your world, and you're interacting with them day to day. And so are other members of your team. So that's, I think, the concept. That's kind of a newer way of moving forward with this. There are people that you're interacting with on the daily who would be the right person for your team. Get them, talk to them, ask them, hey, what's up? Come join this organization, or start your process from there. So I think that that might be an option as well.
for some companies and for some teams that are in charge of recruiting, that will be a nice, friendly alternative to what we have now, where you post a job and get 1,000 applications for it in about 6 minutes, because that's tough to manage too.
Absolutely. Have a card or have some kind of cool like QR thing with you and your team members at all times. And anytime you see someone who you think would be an awesome person to work with, just start that connection.
Yep. Let's move on to the next question on the list here that I thought was kind of interesting from the submissions at the live. This is from Alexei. And he wrote in to ask, how to identify companies that, and for context, Alexei is a recent, not recent, but fairly new from graduating. So, a couple of years in the workforce sort of thing. It seems like a very kind of values, purpose-driven person. He asks, how do I identify companies that genuinely invest in the development of new grads rather than just using them as cheap labor? Great question.
Mhm.
I want to find a workplace that values mentorship and long-term growth, but I'm not sure how to spot the red flags during the hiring process and how to really determine whether or not a company is going to support me and support my growth over time. Great question.
Really great question, and so true. I've seen job postings, one that I actually want to bring on Roast the Post for us to dissect, and it's specific, like new grad, or I can't remember how they named it, but it was very much like early career, I think is what they said. And it's,
Mhm.
well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you can exploit them and just pay them less? Or does it mean you want someone that you can like train and mentor into something? So I think it's a very good question being asked. And I think that the whole reason why we do roast the post is because the company is telling you everything you need to know in that job posting. If they do it, um, and they name it, it's there. Like it's, if it's not named, they're not doing it.
Yeah.
So companies, what I don't see often on job postings is mentoring programs or anything about like your career and development, or what they're going to give back to you. So I think right then and there, an early red flag is that it's not named in the job posting. Um, when we go into the interview process itself, there are a lot of questions that you can ask to surface that. Give interviewers should give you time to ask your own questions, and just be prepared to literally ask that question. Like, how do you
Mhm.
support new grads, and what does mentoring look like at your organization? Like you have the right to ask those questions. And if anybody's like, oh my God, you asked that question, we're not hiring you, well, then you don't want to work there anyway.
Yeah.
Um, and if they're very ambiguous and vague about it, it means that they don't have that. Because if they do, they'll be able to tell you. They'll be able to say, actually, great question. This is what we do. So
Yep.
it's quite straightforward, I think.
Yep. And typically that's the kind of stuff that you really want to ask of, I would ask it more of the hiring manager or the direct hiring team than I would the recruiter early on when you're doing kind of like a phone screen or whatever. Because recruiters a lot of the time are outsourced. They're not actually a part of the company. So you can be talking to
Yeah.
a recruiter who's been hired to hire you, but they don't know jack about how the company really functions, and they're not going to be able to answer questions with nuance and detail very well. So kind of reserve those questions for the hiring manager or the hiring team, someone who's directly employed by the company. Otherwise, you could get into a situation where the recruiter gives a terrible answer, but there's really a good program
It's
in
true.
place. They just didn't know about it, right?
They just
So
don't.
yeah, you want to direct your questions kind of to the right person, let's say. And to echo what Jen said, like if a company doesn't talk about it, they don't really do it. That's true.
Yeah,
It's absolutely true.
it's
So
true.
if you just very point blank say, how do you approach mentorship? Because that's important to me. I want to grow professionally. How do you go about it? If they can't answer, they haven't thought about it, they don't do it.
They
So
don't
it
do.
might not be a match for you.
I think another early signal is the pay band. So, more and more we're seeing pay bands listed in job postings, and that's an indicator to you as well, how invested they are in new grads. If it's like an obnoxiously low salary, um, that's a good indication of what they think about new grads and how they will be treated. Just because someone's a new grad doesn't mean that they have to be paid like, in rocks. Give them like a salary, show them that they have the opportunity to build a career at that organization. So I think that's also an early signal to you about how you would be treated as a new grad.
Yeah. Let's go on to, oh, this is a really good one. We both might we both might struggle with this one a little bit because neither of us are recruiters, but it's an interesting question nonetheless. This is from Jordan. And Jordan says, I'm a new recruiter and I have a nightmare client whose requirements make it hard to keep candidates moving through the pipeline to the point of hire. There's a lot of attrition, is kind of the context of what he's saying. Like he's losing people to attrition because of this client. And he asks, do you have any advice for pushing back on their requests so I can finish the job? I lose so many great candidates to slow progress. Awesome question. And that really drives at the heart of a lot of the stuff that you and I get so pissed off about.
um, that sucks. I do not envy your
Yeah, me neither.
situation at all. Like Paul said, neither of us are actually recruiters, which is hilarious that we have this podcast and everything. But we do have a lot of experience. And so I guess my advice comes from a place of experience when I'm struggling to get something across the finish line. Data. Data is the most important thing that you can bring to the table. You need to be able to speak the language that they'll understand. The way that you are explaining it right now to the stakeholders isn't translating. They don't care because you're not giving them information they care about. What do they care about? Figure out what it is that they need to hear. Is this costing a lot of money?
Mhm.
Then speak that language, give it to them in numbers, whatever it is that you can do to translate what is broken in a language that they will understand and will catch their attention is your path forward for this. That's
Yeah.
kind of my advice there.
Yeah, yeah, echoing that. It's about incentive structures, right? Like, I hope that your billing model as a recruiter working for this company kind of captures in monetary value some of those losses, right? Like, are you being paid a retainer per week, per month? Are you being paid a headhunting fee with a percentage commission? Like, if you're being paid a headhunting fee based on, like, percentage of first year's salary, then they absolutely don't care how many candidates get dropped out of the process, because there's no financial penalty for that inefficiency. So, like, maybe that's something that you just got to rethink a little bit, like how to create the incentive structure with your clients that makes all of this work. But to also echo what Jen said, figure out how to frame this challenge in a way that they will care about, in a way that will kind of make sense to them. And the money side of it makes a lot of sense to me. Like, if you can demonstrate, hey, the opportunity cost of us losing all these candidates is X, whatever the role is, and then just say that to your client. And then that opens up a conversation where you can say, you know what, these things that you're asking for are actually barriers for you finishing this. Like, let's resolve those. It's maybe how to go about it.
I think another thing that I will say is that when my dogs were puppies, I had to figure out the best way to train them. One was food motivated, but one was
Clients are puppies.
what's that?
Clients are puppies.
One was food motivated, one was play motivated. So the reason I'm saying that is because maybe relaying numbers won't work for them. Maybe because you've lost great candidates, maybe you can go and find where those candidates landed and bring that information back to your client and say, hey, because this process took this long, this candidate Josie is now working at Google as the blah blah blah, right? Like, say to them, here's a snapshot of where the
Yeah,
candidates we have lost have landed. They've gone
yeah,
to these amazing companies, which means that this reinforces the idea that these were phenomenal candidates and that we lost out on them. And we lost out on them because of taking too long. So again, motivating. Is it food motivated? Is it play motivated? Is it numbers? Is it proving to them that really great companies snapped up these candidates? So figure out what it is that's going to hook them, and treat them like puppies, because they're little cute puppies that don't know any better. So you have to train them.
I don't think that I'm allowed to say roll up a newspaper and spank them on the butt anymore, but maybe you need to figure that out too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next question is from Sierra. She wrote in and says, I work in finance and I'm trying to fill an empty role on my team, but I'm not getting good matches from our HR team. They work in a different office, in a different city, and I feel like I'm being ignored. How do I fix this?
Oof. I feel like I need a bit more information. So
Yeah,
the HR team who is elsewhere is just not giving you good candidates. Is that?
that's what it sounds like. It sounds like Sierra is just kind of and Sierra, if we're mischaracterizing what you're saying, like, just get in touch with us. Like, shoot us a DM on Substack, or find us on Instagram or something like that, and just ping us. But it sounds like she's just getting ignored because their priorities are elsewhere, and that's easy to do when you're not in the same physical location as somebody who's competing for the time of an HR person. Like, maybe Sierra's in, I don't know, Montreal, but these folks, the HR team, are in an office in Toronto. And so, of course, all the people in Toronto can just walk by the HR team's little co working area and be like, hey, guys, what about blah, blah, blah?
Yep. This is so hard. This is so hard. And I think that a lot of thoughts, and the root of it to me is proximity, sure. But also you kind of named it, like they are not finance people. So they might not even really know what to look for. So
Hmm.
they might not be screening properly. And so bear with me, because this might be asking you to put more on your plate than you would like, and but maybe you have someone on your team that you can delegate this to. I would ask for um, an earlier short list of what they're sending you, instead of say them screening and then them giving you a short list of who they think should be moving forward, and you're like, what are you doing? These are not the right candidates. Maybe try to get into the process a little bit sooner. So maybe see like, hey, can you scrape from your list like 50 people? Don't pre-screen them, just give me 50 resumes of applicants who have applied for this role, and either you or someone on your team can then shortlist and then give it back to the HR people and be like, here's who we want to meet with. Set up these calls for us. Again, I know that's more work, but in the long term, because if you're not correcting this problem, it's going to keep happening.
Yeah.
You are training them on what it is to look for, because they're
Yeah.
missing that piece of information. Getting them to kind of move faster, that's a whole different like systemic organizational issue. But if you're very clear and direct and be like, here's what I need from you, get this to me by like the end of this week, then you're, yeah, again, you're training that system now. You are kind of reshaping what it is, and hopefully you won't have to do that many times. But if they're not sending you quality candidates, and you had any say in the job posting, that's not the problem. The problem is they don't know what they're looking for. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a great diagnostic approach too. If you say like, hey, send me 50 resumes from the general pool, you'll also be able to tell kind of where the problem lies, where the barrier lies, the friction or inefficiency. If the problem is that they're not getting great applicants, then that's one problem. Then you need to take a look at the comp structure. You need to take a look at the benefits. You need to take a look at the campaign structure for recruiting. Like, where are you posting these job ads? Like, what does all that look like? If the resumes themselves are not a fit, your problem's kind of in that area. But if the resumes that you get, that pool, there's a bunch of really good ones, then like Jen said, it's about training that HR team and kind of helping them along. So you know that the problem area is kind of internal versus structural and external. So that's a great diagnostic mechanism, is what I would add to Jen's answer.
Yeah, like figure out where the actual problem is, because right now we're making an assumption on where the problem is, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's not always that obvious. And so
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of extra work for you and your team in the beginning to get to the place where you need to be. No, don't do their job for them. Do not get into that. But yeah, diagnose the right problem and then go from there.
And if you need to, escalate like a mother. Those people got bosses, and if they're just not doing their job for some reason, go to their boss. That's a
Yeah.
bridge you don't want to burn too early, but it's there for you.
And that's the thing too, what I'm trying to prevent is being like, well, this isn't working. Blah, blah, blah. Like be more creative about trying to figure out what
Yeah.
the actual problem is and then address that problem instead of just kind of going on a wild goose chase. So
Yep. Next question, and this is kind of a good news question, which I think is a nice change from the doom and gloom in the state of the labor market that we kind of hear about right now. This is from Eliza. She says, I've been quietly job hunting for 2 years with no luck, and I've given up. Things turned recently, and I have 3 good offers to choose from. It was unexpected, and I'm overwhelmed. How do I decide what to do?
I'm really interested in what turned. Like you had given up and then something
Yeah.
turned and you had 3 offers. I'm really interested in
It
that
sounds, yeah,
aspect.
it sounds like emotionally she just kind of given up. Maybe she was still applying for stuff, and all of a sudden something clicked, and she's gone through interviews and she has 3 offers, but now she's got a different problem. Doesn't know what to do, doesn't know which one to accept.
Yeah, I can't. This is one question that I can't answer for you. Like I cannot answer for you at all. Because that's it just depends on what it is that that you need. Luckily, I was just at a conference and we talked about like designing your life. There's that book, Designing Your Next Chapter, Designing Your Life.
Mm.
And there are a couple of frameworks and things that you can do that will help you. Again, only you can answer these questions, but that will help you make an informed decision. And so if you look at, and I have like my little notebook from the conference, but you know, if you take a moment to do what's called an energy audit, and list what in your work life, what drains you and what energizes you, and then try to map those roles into what you will be essentially doing more of that energizes you. That might be helpful. There's also buckets of in your life, assess on a scale of 1 to 5. How are you feeling about how much time you have in your life to do things? How are you feeling about like where you're at physically, your physical health? Um, Socially, do you have time to have develop like meaningful relationships with your friends, with your community, with your family, whatever? How are things going for you mentally, mental health wise? And then financially, how's the picture looking financially on a scale of 1 to 5 for each of those things? And then again, go back and look at those 3 job offers and see which one is going to suit your needs more. It's really about making the right decision based on what your needs are and your family's needs or whatever else you have going on in your life. It's a good problem to have. And it's so
Mhm.
funny, like there's a drought and then when it rains, it pours. And now you're kind of overwhelmed with this idea. But think about what would have felt perfect to you when you were in that drought phase, what you really would have needed, and then pick that one. Do your research on the companies as well. Um, there's nothing wrong with asking people, reaching out on LinkedIn employees to say like, hey, how do you like working at this company? You don't have to give them all the information. You don't have to say I'm weighing 3 options and but just try to get as much. Again, data is power, so try to get as much information as you can. I don't know, Paul, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, to kind of add to what Jen said there, like it's a tough question to answer. Tough question to answer because so much of it is personal to you. If it were me and I was in this position, this is kind of what I would do. You know, I would look at the 3 offers and say, okay, kind of condition set number 1. Which of these offers or how many of these offers, you can kind of treat this as a filter, provides the financial stability and certainty that you
Yeah.
need. That would be kind of like number 1 for me. Number 2 for me, the second kind of condition set, like, you know, I would use that to filter out something that maybe doesn't meet my financial needs and say, all right, you know, one of these sucks, so I've got 2 left, great. The second condition set that I'd be looking at is which of these offers will support work-life balance the best. Like where can I expect to have respectful, in essence, just respect for my personal life, for my own time? Because at the stage of my life that I'm in right now, I do not want another employer who feels like they have kind of all access to me 24 hours a day, and that my established workday that's supposed to be 40 hours a week is actually 70 or 80. I've done that enough. Thanks, no more. So I'd be looking at that, which job kind of supports that the best. And then the last thing that I would be looking at is which of these offers me the most opportunity for fulfillment. And Jen
Mhm.
talked about this, like what energizes you, what drains you. That's a part of it. But for me also, I'd be looking at what has the most potential for me to be doing interesting stuff. By nature, I'm a very intellectually curious person. So I would look at those 3 job offers and say, okay, these 3 roles that I'd be doing, which one or which ones am I potentially going to be doing really cool? That would be something that I kind of consider to be like right up there. That's about how I would go about it. Like your criteria might be a little bit different, but I think the point that we're both driving at is that you should spend a little bit of time thinking through what your framework is, and then run these through offers through that framework and say, this is what I need, this is what I don't need. Where do each of these offers kind of like rate in that system or that framework or that scale or whatever?
I agree. And I would say that once you make that decision, I strongly advise you not to, if the job that you pick doesn't end up being, what you hoped it would be, not to look back and be like, I should have taken this job, I should have taken, I made a mistake or whatever, and just use this as more data for next time, a learning opportunity, because it's not going to be, whichever one you pick is not going to be perfect, and it's not going to tick all of your boxes. And so
Mhm.
inevitably when you have different, you know decisions, different options, you will always look back and think, well, was this the right choice? So forward, move forward, only,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
you're not going to steer yourself in the wrong direction, ever, ever, ever. It will always serve a greater purpose that's very hard to see in that moment. And you do yourself a major disservice by looking back in it with regret. So just keep moving forward.
Yep, nothing's going to be perfect. There are trade-offs. What are
Yeah.
your trade-offs that you're willing to accept?
Yeah.
Next question, and I think this will be our last question. And we have talked a lot about these questions too, because they're just so great. So, Jen, I think that we're going to have to do like a circle back Q&A and record another episode to carry on, because man, these are some really good questions. The last one that we'll cover today, though, is a big question, and it's something that we talk about a lot indirectly on the show, but we don't actually ever really drill in on this question directly.
I'm
So let's do
scared.
that. Yeah. Taryn wrote in and said, very simply, if you were writing a job ad, how would you do it?
Ooh, oh my gosh, this is a full episode.
Yeah,
I can't
it
answer
is.
that right
Maybe
now.
let's keep it brief, and we can do a
Like
full
mildly
episode on it later.
dehydrated. I don't have the energy to answer this question right now. I've been traveling. Um, that's a really great question. And I think that, yeah, I think I don't even know, where to start. I think Paul and I, like, we've been talking about writing even like a book on
We
this.
have been.
So I don't know that I can answer this question in the amount of time that we have in a thoughtful way. But I think that it would be a full redesign. Not just like, I think the problem is deeper than there's something wrong with job ads. I think the problem is that there's something wrong with how we are hiring.
Yeah, systemic.
Um, right? There's a major systemic problem. And so to answer that question, we would have to go so deep, like up and down. And I can't do that in this format right now. That's
Taryn,
my
I think where we are with this question is we are going to write a book for you. And if you're the only person that buys it, the price will be about, what do you think, $25,000? But if other people buy it, maybe it'll be $12.95. I don't know. Maybe we will like go ahead and write that book, or maybe this will be a part of the book that we eventually do write. Yeah, it's a big question. So for me, I would say, I would give you this advice, Taryn. When you're writing a job ad, number one, make sure that everything that is in your job ad connects to your ideal candidate. So that means you need to think ahead about what your ideal candidate looks like. And that's not necessarily has an MBA, has 7+ years of experience doing blah, 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 whatever. Like, sure, that's kind of a part of it. But if you think about it, education and experience and job history are a proxy for competence. So when you rest on those things, you're kind of copping out a little bit. Everyone does it,
Yeah.
but it's kind of lame, especially in this labor market, and especially with people with talent who are so dynamic and so cross-functional and have so many different experiences. We're doing everybody a disservice by using those proxies in the recruiting process. So that's number one. Like, start with your ideal candidate profile. Think about them when you're writing the job ad. Number two, think about your employer branding. What do you bring to the table that is more than like salary and benefits and role and responsibilities and all that stuff? What can your ideal candidate get out of this from a personal fulfillment standpoint? Even if you're in an organization that is not really big on that, still think through that.
Mhm.
What's in it for them? Communicate your benefits in a way that makes sense. Be honest, be transparent, be as detailed as you can. If you don't feel like you have great benefits, go back to the drawing board, start conversations about developing great benefits. And that doesn't mean that you have to kind of blow like your budget for the entire year, putting in place really fancy, expensive benefits that have all the bells and whistles and whatnot. Your benefits can be targeted to your ideal candidate profile, and they can be very simple. Like one that I came across recently that I quite liked was there was an organization that was in they're in kind of like grooming and that type of stuff, like take your dog in and give them a bath or whatever. One benefit that they
What kind of
offered.
grooming?
What's that?
I was like, what kind of grooming are we talking about here?
Yeah, shampoo your dog, that kind of grooming. One of the benefits that they offered was if you had pets, you could make use of all of the stuff for free to groom your own pets, which doesn't sound like a huge benefit or anything, but they're saying that on their dime, like you can book your pet, you can groom your pet using their equipment, their supplies, dog shampoo or whatever. And that's what it is. And it's not huge, but it's nice. It's kind of targeted to the kind of person that they want there, right? There was also like a discount on pet insurance that they offered. Like they said, we will pay 50% of the premium up to X for your pet. That's another one that relatively inexpensive, but it's on brand. Like it's valuable and it's nice for the people that they want there.
For people who are not aware, this is called an employee value proposition, an EVP. So you need to identify what is your employee value proposition, and that needs to be made explicit in the job posting. The employee has to understand fully what's in it for them. Some companies even create, like Microsoft at one point had a really cool like booklet with like a ring from a binder. And whenever they went to events, or when we talk about the concept of everyone being a recruiter, having that with them to hand out to people, like, here's why you should work for us. That's like first and foremost, right? It goes beyond employer branding. But yeah, I agree with you on that. I think designing it from who your ideal candidate profile is, have the reporting structure in there, have a bit of that EVP, explain what the person can expect. I do like when companies have your first 30 days will look like blah, 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 blah. Or like, here's how we will know we hired the right person for the role. Like,
Yep.
give that information. Don't be shy with having you don't need to have a short job posting. It can be quite long. And that's how you will find like-minded people. That's how you will find the right person. Because you will have written the job profile, the job posting for them, and they will find each other. And if you're trying to kind of cut corners or make it too generic, then you're going to get a whole bunch of generic applicants. So you really have to speak to your ideal candidate, but you need to know who that is first. So.
Yeah, and the first 30-day thing is an example of describing the context behind the organization's dynamics. So as much as possible through the job ad, you want to give candidates context for what's going on there and like where their place in the organization is and the purpose behind what their role is. So like Jen mentioned, and we talk about this on the show a lot, Jen mentioned an org chart. Yeah, like talk about the team, talk about the reporting structure, talk about at the very least who this person is reporting to. That is very rarely done. And it's easy to do. And it's also great because it gives the person context for what they'll be doing and the relative importance of it. So like, describe the context as much as you can in the job ad. And, like Jen said, your job ad doesn't have to be short, but it also shouldn't be, a novel necessarily on the job ad itself. And this is where you see companies kind of shaving off parts of that context to like little career sites on their website. So you can have like an employer microsite that talks about confidentiality and PII handling of data, if that's appropriate, talks about benefits, talks about culture, talks about the team. Like you can do a whole bunch of stuff by teasing in the job ad these topics and then just having links out to to your website. So people who care about that stuff, they'll go there and look further. Another thing both of us really advocate for is always having a salary range.
I was
Even if
going to
it's
say
not a
that, yeah.
requirement. Yeah, always have a salary range, even if it's not a requirement in the jurisdiction where you are. Increasingly, it is becoming a requirement, and be transparent about that salary range. We've roasted some job ads recently that listed a earnings band of on-target earnings without any other kind of detail. And what that means is that you're grouping together the base pay and the performance pay and the commission pay and any other variable structure pay in one number. That number isn't representative of what you'll actually earn, though, which is dishonest. So if your job ad does have an OTE component to it, list the base pay and the variable earnings part separately. Be transparent. If you don't list a salary band, you're just wasting everybody's time. You're going to be on the hiring side, engaging with and dealing with people who they earn the salary and it's on the low end. They're not going to go through with the process. And are you really going to invest the time trying to convince somebody who their number is 120K to take 60K?
Yeah.
Of course not. That's not going to work. So you're just wasting your own time by not putting the salary band right there in the job ad.
Yeah.
Other disclosures like the use of AI, use of kind of PII, like personal information, have those up front and center too. Like increasingly people care about that stuff, as they should. So when you're transparent about that, it builds trust with the person that is ultimately looking at throwing their hat in the ring for this job. The more that you can build trust through these job ads, the easier the process unfolds and the more engagement and excitement you'll get from candidates as the process is unfolding. I think that's all I have to say on the matter. Yeah. But yeah, we should write that book, Jen.
Yeah, I think you named it all. Like if we have to go with the way that we're hiring currently in the world, then yeah, I think that those are the main points. I'm sure we're forgetting a couple of things. But yeah, I think you named most of it, if not all.
We are probably forgetting a couple of things. We're into our second hour of taping, so I think we're both a little bit like in need of hydration and a bathroom break. So we will wrap up there. That has been some of the questions that were submitted for our live that we did last Wednesday, April 29th. And we'll do another live in the future. So keep an eye out for that. And keep an eye out for part 3 of our Q&A from the first Substack Live. See y'all later.
Bye. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Roast the Post, the story behind the bullet points. If today's banter gave you something to think about, or at least made you feel better about the last wild job posting you read, make sure you're subscribed. Hit us up on YouTube or follow the show on your go-to podcast platform so new episodes actually reach you. And if you've got a job posting you want us to roast, confusing, chaotic, or strangely perfect, send it our way. Listener submissions keep this whole thing interesting. Tap that link in the show notes for more. We'll see you next time with a brand new post to unravel. Until then, stay frosty.